Everybody, welcome back to the Beyond the Peloton podcast. I'm Spencer Martin, author of the Beyond the Peloton newsletter. I'm here with our birthday boy, Andrew Vontz from the Choose the Hard Way podcast, thebetterlab.io. We are going to be talking about the World Road Race Championship, which is coming up this weekend on Flow Sports if you're in the US and you're hopelessly trying to find that. And Andrew has some on-the-ground gravel reporting for us. But Andrew, do you want to plug anything? Plug your birthday before you get going?
Yeah, I'd like to just give myself a shout out for being born on this day. So thank you to Bonnie Vontz, who listens to this podcast. Thanks, Mom, and thanks, Dad. I appreciate it. All right, moving on. Spencer, anybody out there who's listening, you may have caught that Tadej Pogačar on Peter Attia. It was quite an interesting conversation. One of the things that really jumped out at me as a co-founder of the Better Lab is that Tadej talked quite a bit about how important it is as an athlete to get in tune with your body and to understand the relationship between how you feel and what that results in as it relates to your performance. I couldn't agree more. And that's part of what we're helping you do at the Better Lab. Wearables often actually make your sleep worse. So if you've used a Whoop, an Oura Ring, you probably have had moments where you wake up and you get a sleep score or recovery score that tells you like, hey, Spencer, you're actually physically dead. You shouldn't get out. You shouldn't get out of
medically
bed
dead. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do think wearables can have some useful information, like the time you went to bed, the time you got up. The rest of it, sleep scientists, I think, have other thoughts about the utility of that information. So what the Better Lab does is we help you mindfully build science-backed practices to sleep better that stick. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you've read, listened to, consumed tons of information about sleep. You've used wearables. You may have become a health spectator just looking at these scores and wondering, like, how do I actually do this stuff? That's what we actually help you do. We help you put these things into action, one simple practice at a time, and get consistent. So please go check out the Better Lab in the Apple App Store. It's free, it works, and I would love to hear from you. Spencer, big news. I'm on Threads now. I got back on there to celebrate Taco Vanderhorn coming out of retirement. You know what a big Taco fan I am. Glad to see him back after the head injury. So you can connect with me there at Vontz, or you can shoot me a DM on Instagram at HardwayPod. Would love to hear from you. Try the Better Lab.
Threads scares me. I'm afraid of Threads. I popped up for a minute. I'm off. Just DM me on Instagram. Anyone in my life, you need to get a hold of me, DM me on Instagram.
Yeah, same. I'm just saying, I know that there are a lot of people still linking tusks over on Mastodon, Blue Sky. That's where most cycling journalists are these days. But I briefly was on Threads to do that Taco Vanderhorn victory dance. Great to have you back, Taco.
I think we'll jump right into, you brought it up, the Peter Attia interview with Tadej Pogačar today, as Peter was saying, he's got it right. We've got it wrong. But this was interesting. I thought it was funny, how him and his girlfriend purposely don't look at their sleep scores or HRVs. And HRV, I don't fully understand it. Is that just the difference between your max and minimum heart rate per day? Is that what?
No, your heart rate variability is the time between your actual heartbeats, and the variability in those beats can provide you with a lot of information. It's more complex than that, but similar to what I've learned from working with some of the world's top sleep scientists, including Eddie Ben-Simone at UC Berkeley, who's on our advisory board at the Better Lab, and Dara Harris, who's a world-class high-performance expert, has done a lot of work with professional athletes and other populations. HRV is the sensors that we're using both for HRV and sleep. They are not clinical grade sensors, and most people who are operating sleep science labs or doing exercise physiology will tell you that you're getting an estimate at best with these devices. They may be accurate relative to themselves. Generally, you're not getting highly accurate or useful information about your HRV or your sleep stages from these devices. And as we've seen, and as today shared, it often can just make your performance worse if you're getting bad sleep scores that are not actually accurate. There's actually a study out about, it's called sham sleep feedback, and it's related to the impact it has when you show people more or less what we're talking about. If you just give them a make-believe score in the morning that's bad, it ruins their entire day. So this is now empirically validated through academic research.
Yeah. So he was talking about how they're just always not looking at that. And a few numbers that jumped out to me, and I've seen some confusion about this online. Peter went ahead and asked, I don't think he asked, what's your FTP, but he gave us the next best thing. He said, what is your zone 2 power? So this would be like what you could ride with all day, basically. And Pogačar was saying it's a little complicated because he lives in Monaco. When you're in Monaco, you're kind of on climbs or you're on descents. There's not a ton of flat. Maybe if you ride to Nice, that would be the closest flat road you could get. But he's saying, when you're on a climb, a 20, 30-minute climb going zone 2, that may not be your zone 2 if you were riding for 5 hours because of cardiac drift. Like your zones will change over 4, 5, 6 hours of riding. They become, your power basically gets lower as your heart rate goes up. But he was saying on a climb, like a 20-minute climb outside his house, he's riding zone 2 heart rate. He's pushing a little like 340 watts, which that's stunning for someone that, let's just say he races around 65, 64 kilos. Let's say he's at his tour weight of 64. That's 5.3 watts per kilo in zone 2. That's like what Geraint Thomas was winning Tour de France is at, on climbs. So that shows you why he's so hard to beat, because when Ineos is on the front at the Giro and they're going as hard as they can on these climbs, when people are saying, why don't people attack? Why don't they try to make the race hard for today? Drop him. He's in zone 2. He's riding zone 2 when they're trying to drop him. So that gives you a little window into why he wins so much, because he's very naturally light, which is a huge advantage. He's saying you only had to lose like 4 kilos from the middle of winter to the start of the Tour de France, which almost no one does that. Like Geraint Thomas probably loses. He said he went to an all-inclusive resort after the tour and gained something like, wasn't like 10 or 15 kilos like in a week. So even Jonas Vingegaard, you've noticed he's racing lighter and lighter and lighter. Like he probably lost 10 kilos before the tour this year. So the fact that today I can lose so little weight and his power is so high and he is naturally light, I mean, that's a recipe for success right there. Kids, if you want to be good at cycling, be really light, be really strong, and also just be like a world-class bike handler as well, and have great racing tactical instincts.
Yeah, over on the Maxim podcast that Geraint Thomas and Luke Rowe do, they were talking about the difference between being really, really lean, which you have to be a World Tour cyclist, and being Tour de France lean. And as you noted, these guys were dropping massive amounts of weight to be at Grand Tours. And, today it just has like a very low variability. And that means he's going to be able to be less prone to illness. He's going to be able to train harder more frequently. He's going to dominate the volcano like Joe.
Yeah. And he doesn't have to go to the volcano that much, because it's like, well, why does he have to dial in as much as them? He doesn't. Yeah. It's a massive, I thought it was like the most interesting part of that podcast was that he was basically saying, I don't have to lose that much weight. He also said, I don't really deprive myself of anything during the season. I bet if you ask Geraint Thomas, he would say, I'm depriving myself of everything during the season, which is why, think of Geraint Thomas's fit window. It's like tiny. Yeah. Think of today's, it's the whole season, because he can just roll out of bed. I've been eating chocolate cake. He did say he started watching his diet this year for the first time because he's getting older. Right. And you can't just eat McDonald's all the time. So started watching his diet, but he said, he's like, I don't really deprive myself of anything. I thought it was super interesting. Way to go, Peter Attia, with an out of left field exclusive interview. I assume he just flew to Montreal to get an in-person interview when he was in Canada. Pretty impressive, like drop out of nowhere there from, I think it's called the Drive podcast, but good stuff in there, I thought.
Yeah. The drive-by. And Attia, of course, he is a cyclist. I haven't heard him talk about it at tremendous length, but he's done a lot of content where he's sitting on a trainer talking about, and he's had Inigo San Milan on, and which is interesting because there's a rift between Tadej and Inigo, right?
I mean, rift would be a strong, maybe. Okay. What does Gwyneth Paltrow say? A conscious uncoupling or something?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's like Gwyneth and the Coldplay guy.
Yeah. Steve Martin, I think. Is that right? That can't be right. Something.
Yeah, totally. Madonna and Guy Ritchie. Yeah.
I was actually in Austin I was on the Attia beat last week, Heard he doesn't ride outside that much, but he clearly is like crunching races. He's crunching tape. The guy like knows his races. I was actually pretty impressed by his cycling knowledge. And this is like the Malcolm Gladwell zone where you can know a little bit about a topic, but then you speak as though you're an expert, and then people that aren't expert are like, oh man, this guy is off base. But he did a good job of avoiding that, where he knows what he knows and he knows what he doesn't know, and he doesn't try to overstep. So yeah, I was like pleasantly surprised. And I like that he's kind of like an advocate for these freakishly good cyclists, I think, in a way that a lot of media isn't, that I think is unfair. Like you look at who just won the US Open in tennis, the guy tested positive for steroids like 3 weeks before, and that's fine. But like Tadej Pogačar's never tested positive for anything, but he's presumed to be dirty. So I think Attia is a good advocate there.
Yeah. I mean, we need to get him on the show. It'd be fun to have a chat with him about cycling, talk a little bit about his zone 2 protocol. How many grams of carb per hour is he using on the trainer? And I mean, I was surprised with Pog. He didn't get into grip strength or deadlifting, but maybe on the next interview, we'll see that.
Well, you've been worried about team bus toilets for maybe since I've known you.
Yeah.
Did you catch this where Today was saying that so if you're wondering who's Today, it's Tadej. He's Today now. I'm saying his name
Today
right.
is Tadej.
But he was saying, oh, like back in the day before we got good carbohydrates, I think he said shit my pants after every race. And it's like, well, there's Andrew's theory right there.
Yeah.
That toilet was, and then what's the protocol? Like who's first? I need more.
I mean, we know who's first.
Behind the scenes content. And like if you're the 5th, 6th guy in the team, are you looking for like the ASO porta potties? Like you're like, I know I'm not even getting in line for that bathroom because I don't have the clout.
Well said, Spencer.
Well, so we have the cycling world championships coming up. Road cycling, whatever. I don't know. Time trials happen.
We've got road and gravel. We've got road this weekend. Then the main event, I believe, is the following weekend. I've got it up here. Let's take a look.
Well, let's talk. Yeah. Well, here,
October 5th and 6th in Flanders. The world of gravel is coming. Yeah.
We're going to have plenty of time for gravel because I cover your ears if you don't want spoilers about this men's road race, but it's in Zurich. It is 274 kilometers long. It features 4,300 meters of climbing. This is if you like rank all the monuments plus world championship plus Olympics from this year, 7 races, this is the second most vertical gain total. So of all those, so pretty hard race. To put it in perspective, Mathieu van der Poel's never won a race with more than 3,600 meters of elevation gain. So this is very hard. Like I looked it up. Mark Hershey has won one day race with more than 4,000 vertical meters. Tadej Pogačar has won basically endless. But how does Pogačar not win this? Like I think there's almost like a conspiracy going on where people don't want to like come out and say like, yeah, this isn't even going to be a competition, because what's happened over the last 2 years is Pogačar has gotten so much better than everybody else. I think he was getting beat by Van der Poel at Flanders, beat by Jonas Vingegaard at the Tour. He goes to the Tour this year, roasts Vingegaard, and he's beating Van der Poel and Van Aert at will in these one days. He's won 19 races this year. Van der Poel's raced like 29. So he's almost won as many races as Van der Poel has raced this year. I mean, it's unbelievable what he's doing.
Looking at the race on Sunday, the weather is looking dry at the moment. I just, if we do have a wet race, if the weather changes, that could be a very major factor, I would think, on this course.
I don't know. It would be a factor. Also, don't sleep on it raining. It is Switzerland in late September. Like it could very well rain. I would worry more about like the cold. Like I don't know if you saw, like today it was kind of warm in the U23 race, but like tomorrow high of 51. If that's raining, that's freezing cold.
That's freezing. I guess
that's going to be the women's race. It's 100% chance of precipitation, 51 degrees. So that could be a major factor. And think about like how skinny, like if you look at the new trend in like women's, I guess, Grand Tour racing, we don't really have Grand Tours, but like stage racing, like if you notice that the Tour de France femmes, like very skinny, like I don't know how you could handle being in rainy, high 40-degree weather with that low of body fat. So that could be a major factor. think the men's, I mean, I guess let's just assume it's dry. Then that takes a lot of the variables out of it. It could, if it is rainy, you could get something weird happening. But the race is going to be so hard. I don't know if you've been watching like the juniors and the U23s, but it is like, it's blowing up almost immediately. And you'd say, like, oh, that's junior and U23. That's not going to happen in like the pro race. But I went back and looked. Have you been noticing the same people win every major race in men's cycling? So if you go through the last 2 years of monuments and Olympics and world championships, 3 riders are dominating it: Van der Poel, Pogačar, Evenepoel, and only one other rider outside of those 3 have even won one, and it's Jasper Philipsen, who won San Remo, best sprinter in the world, wins the Sprinters Classic. Not exactly unexpected, and he's teammates with Matthew Van der Poel. So I think we'll see it blow up like very early, because if you are Remco, like, what's the advantage of even sitting around waiting to be crashed on one of these descents? Like, it's not, or attacked, or get like sucked into some tactical gambit. Just like do a Strade Bianchi, attack and get out there early. No one can pull you back. I heard like some pundits were like, oh, like what team could get organized and pull him back? It's like, no team is pulling back Remco. Like we saw it at the Olympics. No team is pulling back Pogačar. No team's pulling back Van der Poel. Like, you better be in that move or you're not winning the race. And I would assume that's how it's going to play out.
We're on Pro Cycling Stats, just taking a look at
which we assume is correct, but maybe isn't correct.
May not be. Yeah. But I mean, so just relative to last year, this seemingly is a much less technical circuit. It has the Witticon climb. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. This is the major. This will be the decisive climb but there's just like a lot of flat and rolling on the circuit other than this climb.
Well, that's what it says on Pro Cycling Stats, but
that doesn't mean anything. Sure.
It's you're kind of descending or climbing, because so when they descend like off this little mountain, like a little mountain outside of Zurich to the lakeside, it's it's obviously flat-ish if you're riding alongside a body of water, but they're only on that for, maybe 2 kilometers. And then once they're back in the city of Zurich and they go through the start finish, you're like, once you take that right-hand turn and leave the city, you're climbing again, even if it's not like a classified part of the climb.
Yeah. And so there's some very steep gradient here though on this climb. So that's likely where we're going to see some separation. How far out is this going to go? I mean, I feel like this is going to get hot fast.
So how far out is it going to go? Let's go look at the start list, because if this was a trade team race, it probably wouldn't go that far out, because today Pogačar would have a super strong UAE team.
Yeah.
This gets complicated because this is contested by national teams. So he's going to have like secret teammates hidden in the race. Like if you're a UAE rider and you're on, I don't know, let's look at it like Latvia. I don't think they have one, but I'm just picking them. You might say, I'm probably not going to win the race. Tom Squeens probably won't win the race. It's maybe a bad example, because if there was a wild card win, Tom Squeens could be one. But if you're and let's say you're here by yourself, like there's countries here with one rider. So like Japan has one rider, Israel has one rider. I think South Africa has 2. If you're South African and you're on UAE, you're thinking, well, I get paid to work for Tadej Pogačar. Today's no different. I'm just going to work for him. So you have secret teammates. His Slovenia team's not weak though. And he scores so many points. They have a full team. No, wait, they have 7 riders. I believe the full team is 8, and there's only a few teams with 8 riders, but they have 7 riders. We can like pencil Primož Roglič. There's all this debate about, is Roglič going to work for Pogačar? No, he's not going to work for Tadej Pogačar. Just like set him aside. He might attack early. There might be like incidental team help, like you see with Evenepoel and Van Aert, where it's like, hey, you're going to attack, then I'm going to attack. They can't follow both of us. One of us will win. Could be like that. But he's got like a strong team, like Jan Tratnik, Luka Mezgec, Domin Novak, who's on his UAE team actually, Matic Zoomer, and then this guy, Mat Govaker, who I'd never heard of until you sent over the results of a UCI World Series gravel race last night.
Seattle, Europe.
He won. Yeah, Sea Otter Europe.
That's what it's called. It's
got to be a stud to win that. But seriously, it's like against strong riders. This guy wins a gravel race. And it's like, I can guarantee you he has no other objective on Sunday other than working for Tadej Pogačar. So he's going to have like some engines at the front. When they run out, he will attack, or Evenepoel attacks before him, because the only way you can beat Tadej Pogačar, maybe if you're Mathieu van der Poel, you can beat him in a sprint. Maybe not though. But if you're Evenepoel, you got to go like early, like earlier than Pogačar, like he did at the Olympics, and hope to catch people out. I could see it going, 80, 75, because then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circuits done. You're on your 6th circuit, climb crest with like 70K to go. I wouldn't be shocked to see the race go there. As that's not as far as like Strade Bianche, but that's kind of a goofy race because there's not a lot of advantage of chasers there. So I would say a little less than Strade, but a long way out. Like we could see this thing blow up by the time people in the US wake up.
One rider who will not be there on the Slovenian national team, who was originally on the start list, of course, is Matej Mohoric. And we need to go into a gravel sidebar here for a moment. So Mohoric,
why isn't he here?
Okay, so Mohoric, all right, let's just get into this, Spencer. Mohoric had a terrible tour. 2.5 weeks prior to the tour, he went and attempted to win Unbound. He is the reigning gravel world champion. He went over to Unbound. That's a lot of travel to a difficult to reach place. He flatted out.
We definitely
right?
talked about. I believe we at least talked about it privately. Like this is insane. It's very hard to get there.
Like I think he came from the volcano or some altitude camp, went straight to Emporia, Kansas, had a terrible race, flatted out at mile 50, then had to go all the way back to Europe. It just was highly disruptive at a time when you need to be a finely tuned machine going into the tour. My personal hypothesis is it really jacked up his preparation for the tour. Has a bad tour coming out of the Grand Tour season. He wants to defend his gravel world championship title, and he's slated to race Road Worlds this weekend. Last weekend, he goes to do his second gravel race of the season because he said he wanted to do something to honor the world champion jersey and do a race. So he went to do Sea Otter Europe in Girona, or outside Girona. And while reconning the course, guess what? Loose gravel in a corner, goes down. I believe tore skin off both of his hands and is now out of Road World Championships. So he's not on the team. He is still going to race Gravel Worlds. But I think there are a couple of interesting things here. I feel like dabbling in gravel has had a significant negative impact on Mohoric's season. And I think it also highlights what we've seen going on in the world of gravel racing. Just racing on marbles over hard packed gravel. It's so unpredictable. Anything can happen. There's a lot of risk. Obviously, we've talked about some of it in road racing, but no matter how good you are, there are certain factors in gravel that just make it a pretty risky proposition for a world tour rider, I think. And at the same time, we're seeing a lot of world tour riders on teams that have underperformed this year. I'm looking at you, Ineos, that are actually targeting gravel worlds. Like, I think it's a very major objective to try to salvage a pretty garbage season.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
So, Matt, I know people love him. I mean, I don't dislike him. I like him too. I'm just wondering, is there a financial component here that he's not completely disclosing? Like, why would he go to Unbound? That cannot be. I mean, you and I think we were talking on the podcast about like weddings we skipped while we were training for our bullshit races. Like, yeah. Like the tour started June 29th. Like the fact that he would go to Emporia, Kansas in early June.
It's bananas.
And then I guarantee you so he doesn't finish the race. He probably has to stick around and do like some sponsor commitments for his bike.
Yeah.
It's not even clear to me why his bike sponsor, Merida, cares about the US market, because they don't sell bikes here. But the whole thing seems a little strange to me. The fact that he would go do this gravel race, he didn't even do the race, he crashed before it, but that he would do the race right before the World Championships, it seems a little sketchy too. As you say, that's a lot of risk. But then even like the non-risk, it's like, going to Emporia is going to drain you, and not what you should do to prepare for the Tour. I know he had a decent Tour Poland, a decent Renui Tour. So it's not like he's had a season where he's at the back every day, but pretty much at the Tour, he was at the back. And I'd imagine that was a pretty big goal for him. I don't understand it. And I do kind of wonder if there's an unsaid financial component here. Like if he's getting money from probably not Bahrain, but and there is this inherent conflict in these teams now between the bike sponsor and the title sponsor, where of course the bike sponsor wants these riders, like Pinarello probably wants Tom Pidcock to win gravel worlds more than road worlds, because then they can sell a bunch of gravel bikes, because I guess they figure the market is saturated with the road product. Guess what? All those people who bought the Pinarello Prince when Bradley Wiggins maybe it was a dogma, was like winning the Tour, they now need a gravel bike. They're not going to buy a road bike. They already have a road bike. So it's just like a way to sell people another bike. That's why the bike sponsors want them to go. I just would love to see the details, the financial details of this, because it feels a little funny to me. He would risk that much right before a Road World Championship. And maybe he didn't care. Maybe he doesn't care about the Road Worlds, but I guarantee you his Slovenian team does. I mean, that's a big deal for Slovenia to win a Road World title. Yeah. I don't have answers. I just have more questions. Sorry, I'm a little unsatisfying input there.
Yeah. We'll have to come back to this Sea Otter race and talk about gravel worlds.
Genius place for a race, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, go fish where the fish are. Do your gravel race in Girona. Like that list was stacked. Like a lot of good riders.
It's so stacked. Yeah.
Is the biggest, setting world aside, is that the best gravel race in the world, you think, by competition level? Did just happened? Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like potentially, I don't know. I feel like there have definitely been other gravel races that had more current top world tour pros competing. And I mean, we've seen this in the UK because, again, Ineos is clearly targeting gravel worlds. So they've had the Swifts showing up, they're on the national team. So they'll be at gravel worlds. They clearly want to win. And, we've seen a lot of former classic winners. We had Van Avermaet.
I would say Greg actually was really good at Unbound, but
yeah,
people can almost get distracted by that. Like, are they trying right now? I guarantee you, Alessandro De Marchi was trying, and he got 8th.
Oh yeah.
Versus, and he's on Jayco Alula currently.
Right. And I mean, to look at Peter Vacock, who got blocked in the finish shoot at Unbound the last time Keegan won, someone who was doing the 25-mile fun ride shut the door on Peter. But I mean, that shows to me, that guy, look how well he finished in this race. I mean, he's a former World Tour rider, and he's still got it. That's a really impressive ride in this field.
He's serious. Peter Vacock's seriously good rider. I think he won the Branch Peel, which is a big one-day race. But he's not falling off. He's not doing this for. No, he's not waving at the crowd like he's trying to win races. Chad Haga, who got second on Bend, it's 21st, and then our U.S. national champion Brendan Wirtz, 50th place. This reminds me of when this guy Lee Bumgardner, he was a big dude, football player size from Omaha, would just crush the Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Iowa scene, and then you go to nationals, amateur nationals, and finish 70th, and it's there is a delta here in ability, but. Before hold
on. So in the category of probably not trying that hard, formerly quite talented, we've got Daniel Oss, who I feel like in American gravel racing, he's taken the fun ride approach, but has been something of an animator in races in the past couple of years. Finished 66th in this race. He's not making party.
That one stuck out to me. I did kind of felt like Oss was a little checked out his last year as a pro. As goes Sagan, so goes the Oss. But I mean, he does ride a lot. But I mean, it just shows you, like, you have to be dialed in. Like, you have to be so dialed in to win these races, especially at the European level. They're turning into, almost like this would be like a .pro road race level of competition.
Well, same. We've got Nathan Haas in 81st. And as you pointed out, Brennan Wirtz, U.S. national champion, finished 50th at this race. This race did have climbing that probably made this not the best course for Brennan. World championships are they're quite a bit flatter. As you probably know, if you're listening, most of the top US gravel pros they're not going to the gravel world championships. And I think when we take a look at this Seattle Europe race last weekend, I think this tells us why they're not going. One of the factors is there's still races left in the Lifetime Series. There is some prize money. I don't think that's how even the best riders are making the bulk of their income in America. And
it's still too much though, right? Like, I'm thinking of just Keegan. It's $100K for first, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, for Keegan,
and he couldn't afford a chance to do that, probably.
Well, but here's the wild thing. I was thinking about this. So I reached out to McGill, shared this with us when he was on the show, and I reached out to him again yesterday to confirm it. Scott McGill, American legend, and he competed at the Road Worlds in Australia the year no one wanted to go. It's not a sliding at Scott stepped up. He went. He had to pay for his own plane ticket, and then there were costs on the ground as well. Keegan also went that year. So this is quite interesting. So Keegan, I mean, I'm guessing that he and his coach decided that was the year when they were calibrating, hey, does Keegan try to move over to the world tour and become a climbing domestique or move in that direction? So maybe they thought, let's make the investment. But those guys had to pay their own way that year. And now we have Keegan, who, you know what? He had a really fantastic ride at Gravel Worlds last year and had some bad luck because they did this at Seattle Europe. I was watching some actual coverage of the event, and they did it at Gravel Worlds last year, where the riders that are out contesting the gravel circuit all year get stuffed. They just put the World Tour riders on the front of the grid, which has a pretty substantial impact on the outcome. That happened to Keegan last year. So he had to move his way up through traffic, and he still had a great ride, had a really good result. And it was conceivable last year, had he not had a bad spot on the grid, and maybe he could have won, actually. This year, things have changed. And it's just interesting to me that when Road Worlds were in Australia, Keegan was willing to pony up, pay his own way, go there and, not be an animator in the race at Road Worlds. And now here we are a few years later, when last year he was a factor and a podium contender, and this year he's like not even going to go so that he can go, ride in Bentonville.
Well, I mean, I was befuddled by the decision and found it somewhat depressing, because if Keegan's future is just crushing people in semi-amateur gravel races and then not racing against the best, that sounds terrible. But here, this might be a little bit of, give us some light on why this is happening. These are the current standings of the Lifetime Grand Prix, which have 100. I would like this, like, remember the $1 million prize for the NCL? Like, I want to see the fine print. And you had to win more races than they actually competed in or offered.
Yeah.
I want to see
the NCL had to not implode. Yeah, there were a lot of extenuating circumstances.
So Keegan Swinson, 129 points. Second place, Payson McElvin, 116. Matthew Beers, 108. So if Keegan goes to Gravel Worlds and isn't able to compete at Little Sugar, Big Sugar, or I think both of those are, they're a butt weekends. I think both of those are in the Lifetime Grand Prix. He probably loses to those guys in the Lifetime Grand Prix and doesn't want to do that. I guess that's probably more important for his sponsors than getting like fifth at Gravel Worlds. Would be an incredible ride, but does anyone care about that except for me, you, and Keegan? Like that's potentially harder to sell to sponsors, I guess.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So it's just interesting how we're seeing this shake out, and gravel is becoming much more important to lower tier, or maybe lower tier is not the right way to characterize it. Some of these big budget World Tour teams that just, they can't win. They just can't find a way to win. So now they're pivoting to gravel.
What's your sourcing on, how do you know that Ineos is focusing on gravel worlds?
Just go look at the national championship results. Here, I'll pull it up.
Is that not potentially, though, those riders knowing that a house cleaning is about to come and they're looking for second careers?
Potentially. Do you think Connor Swift's on his way out?
I would say everyone at that. The fact that they're trying to get rid of
everyone at Ineos is on
everyone at Ineos should be looking currently for job openings.
All right.
Connor Swift does have a contract of 2026.
Okay. I'm doing something incredibly dangerous. I'm attempting to open a cycling news article to try to find information.
Oh no. Everyone listening to this just got a virus.
Yeah. Okay. So Connor Swift won. Ben Swift, Cousins, third place. I think that this indicates interest. I think they're interested in, and Cameron Mason, past guest on Choose the Hard Way and on Beyond the Peloton, fourth.
I don't know if this is I just cannot imagine Ineos. This is the problem. There's probably no one in an Ineos management meeting. There's currently no one steering the ship. So it's just the Swifts are saying hey, we want to race gravel, and then they go do that.
Oh, and then Alison Jackson, another former guest, she showed up and won the British Gravel Championships, but of course was ineligible for the title. So one of those weird Philly situations that used to happen where Gaggioli won, but someone from Coors Light gets the national championship title. It's Mike Engelman or someone like that. And Alison Jackson also was at the Girona Gravel World Series event. And she said, gravel's not my focus. This was fun. I mean, she's clearly going for a gravel world title as well.
I just have a hard time believing Ineos. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Ineos, the team, just doesn't exist in 2 years, because you start to they're cutting costs, they're cutting corners at Manchester United, and it's not going to take a genius accountant to be hey, wait a second, we could build a new training facility with the money we're spending per year on this cycling team that doesn't win anything.
Well, they're putting all the talents going into those enclosures on their America's Cup boat.
Yeah. Right. Ineos is just a feeder for the America's Cup guys. I guess maybe those are different skills, as we learned with Ashton Lambie. But wait, who do you think is going to win Road Worlds?
Well, let's go back to that. I'm going to answer your question with a question of my own. Remco has a hot hand. He's also a bit petulant. You think Remco has a snowball's chance? Could he pull this off?
Yes. So I thought, after having watched Tour of Britain, obviously the double at the Olympics, time trial road, that's incredible. I thought this guy's chilling out a bit, because how could you not? You're obviously going to have an emotional, not letdown, but just things are going to calm down a bit and you won't be as on edge. He won the world time trial championships. We didn't cover that because I never quite know what to say. Wow, geez, they sure were going fast. But he wins it. I feel like I'm once again cherry picking Evenepoel things just to criticize him, but he only wins by 6 seconds over Filippo Ganna. Is that vintage Evenepoel? Could he win time trial worlds at not peak ability? Probably. He's that good of a time trialist. The guy's unbelievable. Yeah, I think yes. I think almost no one has a chance outside of Pogačar. If something funky happens, it has to be a rider like Evenepoel to make it happen. So therefore, I do believe he has a chance. Another Evenepoel budget, a Wish.com version of Remco Evenepoel is Mark Hirschi. I wouldn't totally write him off. Here's the problem, though. I think I said this earlier in the show, but it's if you're not top tier, you're usually not winning one-day races anymore, because they become feats of strength more than tactical battles. So the problem is, if you're Mark Hirschi, are you a better climber than Remco Evenepoel? Probably not. Are you better at soloing away? No, you're not, even though you're very good. So you start to get this checklist where you're not the most elite at that skill. So therefore, if you go to the line, Van der Poel's going to win. If you try to go solo, Evenepoel's going to drop you. If you try to attack on the climb, your trade teammate, Tadej Pogačar, who He has not beaten a one-day race since 2020 Liège-Bastogne-Liège.
Wow.
It's kind of a funky stat, though, because he's his teammate. So he would normally be working for him. But Mark Hirschi doesn't win a lot of big one-day races, probably for a reason, because a lot of his skills others possess in greater competency.
And let's get wild. Who are some outsiders that could capitalize on potential chaos, which I just don't see happening? I think it's just going to come down to a handful of Galacticos streaking like shooting stars across the sky. But is there anyone on this start list that you think has a puncher's chance?
I mean, this might be a little. I mean, these are not like wild cards.
The old Camponeritz rope-a-dope.
I would say like Schelmo. Like look for someone like Schelmoza, like a really elite climber / one-day racer who could capitalize on chaos. Even as I say that, I don't even really believe it. I like Stevie Williams, but I'm having a hard time even believing this as I say it. I mean, the craziest one would be Alaphilippe. He's on decent form, but he's going to get. I just believe in my heart that these guys like Van der Poel, or I'm not Van der Poel. He probably wants it to be an easy race so it doesn't get dropped. But like Pogačar and Evenepoel have thought about this and think, well, if we go really hard, we're going to drop all those guys. And I know that there's the legitimate concern of like, well, what if it's Van der Poel, Pogačar, and Evenepoel away together? Who's going to pull? I guarantee you they all pull because they all think they're going to beat each other. Like these guys aren't thinking like, Mathieu Van der Poel's here. He could beat me in a sprint. Like they all think that they're the best at everything, so they'll probably pull. I mean, I would be kind of fun if we look at the Americans, like Matteo Jorgensen, like it's not impossible.
Yeah,
that would be cool. Actually, Quinn Simmons. I don't know if you watched the Tour of Luxembourg. Sneaky good race. I've been thinking about doing like a ranking of races. Like you're on watch. Like San Sebastian, you're on notice. Like you're getting very boring. Liège, you're getting very boring. Tour of Luxembourg would be moving up that power ranking because that was a good race. Final day, Quinn Simmons looked incredible, especially considering that layoff. I think this is too much climbing for Quinn Simmons, though. He won't win, but he looked very good. The U.S. comes with an oddly strong team. I don't know if you've looked at the start list, but
yeah,
it's actually shocking to see that. But yeah, I guess Matteo Jorgensen would be my obligatory American wild card, and he does have the talent and ability to do it if things got really crazy.
Spencer, you may have more insight on this than I do. Taking a look at this U.S. start list, most of these riders probably compensated pretty well. I would say Riley is the one that is probably not compensated at the same level as these other riders would be my guess. Are there trade teams ever paying to send them to Worlds, or are these guys always footing the bill for a race like this?
I think most people assume that the National Federation pays for riders to go. And I think for almost everyone, that's true. Like Great Britain, they said that they're spending more money on this Worlds than they did the Australian Worlds. That's how expensive.
However, they didn't send any riders the European National Championship because of costs. So, I mean, they're
probably to save money on because they knew Zurich was going to be a big old bill.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. That's crazy to me that it's more expensive to send riders to Zurich than it is send them to Australia. Yeah. But that is honestly probably why they, like European championships, like this is just like grew. It like is a weed that popped up one day. You're like, who asked for this race? Why are we doing this race? And I support GB for saying, hey, this race is stupid. We're not going to do it. I do think the riders pay for themselves, right? Because remember we had Scott McGill on and he said he paid his own way out to Australia.
We talked about it. Yeah, the U.S. riders do. But I'm just wondering, if you're at a top team, maybe this is part of your contract, but probably.
Well, remember Wout was complaining. God, I'm trying to remember this now. He had like buy his own business class flight to Australia. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do.
Which would suggest that Belgium was not paying for it.
Yeah.
Or his team. I mean, it gets maybe the team. Pay for it.
I'm just repeating stuff I've heard from other sources, but I know that Cavendish 1 year paid for the entire GB team to fly business class because he wanted them to be rested so that he could try to win the race.
Do you know what year that was?
I don't know if it's the year he won Worlds. So I'll have to check into it further.
We're talking intra-European. I mean, that's small premium.
Yeah, okay.
And you're just getting the middle seat block. It's not even real business class. I heard
are they even lie flat? Come on.
Oh yeah, no, they're like they're like in the U.S. they would get like not approved. Just like you can't have a seat this thin. No one is actually safe. But I heard a funny story about Cavendish where I think it was Beijing, where if you won a medal, they would GB would upgrade you to business class. And I think Cavendish was the only one who didn't win a medal, so he had to fly in economy.
My God,
I think that's true. I just fact check to make sure that's true, but it's just a funny thought, even if it's not true.
All right, we do need to go back to gravel for a minute. Spencer, a lot of people have written in who missed the Yampa Valley Brewing Company event after we relocated due to the hysteria, the Little Toots Hot Springs.
We would have gotten beat up if we stayed at Little Toots.
Yeah,
I forgot that was the name.
Yeah, things had just gotten out of control. Too many fans. We had to get over to the Yampa Valley Brewing Company. As listeners have probably seen, a lot of conflict at SBT. This is kind of gravel's Altamont moment, it seems. Ranchers up in arms. Now the state patrol has said we're not going to be able to provide security for this event because it's not held on closed roads, which has implications, as I understand, knock-on implications potentially for all events throughout the state of Colorado, because I think this could set a precedent. It does seem to me like everything we've talked about related to the lack of some basic safety precautions in gravel and the behavior of riders at these events has actually caught up to the events. And not that I think the ranching community or whoever is behind getting SBT kicked out of Steamboat or getting shut down, I don't think that they're right. And you and I have done these events. We've seen how people ride. We've seen the things that happen. It just seemed like an inevitability that they're going to have to move in the direction of closed courses, circuits, having law enforcement there, having full closure. And that's what we're seeing with these UCI level events like Sea Otter Europe, which I think is just a real interesting thing from a branding and naming point of view. Do they have Sea Otters over there in Girona?
No, they might. I don't know if they do. They might be just completely confused by. And yeah, no, this is kind of, I guess I see the point, because a lot of these races are not safe. Having done them, you could probably attest to this better than anyone, but they're not safe. I could understand why a sheriff's department would say, like, we can't guarantee people's safety, therefore we can't let this happen. But it's if this is the precedent, it probably does kill any type of racing that happens on roads in Colorado.
Yeah.
But I guess this has been happening in slow motion anyway. Like with every form of racing, it just becomes cost prohibitive to do it in the US because it's so hard to secure courses, and then it all just moves to Europe. So we're probably seeing the same thing with gravel. As crazy as that is to say.
Yeah. I've fact checked myself. There are river otters in Girona. They were reintroduced in 1993 after disappearing from the area due to pollution, hunting, and habitat destruction. But they're back.
Whoa.
River otters, not the same as a sea otter, of course.
We have to get Riley on to talk about the river otters that he sees on his rides. Now I'm thinking about, like, how are they paying to get there? I would guess they all paid their own way. Like maybe you could expense it back to the team. It could imagine like Richard Pluga getting that expense report and saying like, hey, you weren't racing for us, so we're not going to pay this.
Or what if your trade team did pay? I wonder if that's even permitted, and then you have an incentive to ride for your trade teammates, which we know they're doing anyway.
It probably is. I don't think there's any rules. Since it's a UCI event, there's already no rules. I would guess they're permitted. The whole thing is weird because like, who's the mechanic? Like, is it a trade team mechanic, or is it a at Norway?
It's a national team. Yeah, that's part of the fee you have to pay for the ground. I think that's lodging, food, mechanic. Riders actually have to chip in to cover.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But you're riding your team bike, so you're like on machinery provided by your trade team. It doesn't make any sense, but it's kind of fun. I mean, if we did this all the time, like if the tour was contested by national teams, it would be terrible.
Yeah.
But the fact that it only happens once, or at most, I guess twice, I guess with Europe, if we count Europeans, 3 times a year, the chaos of it. I also believe there's no race radios, which is not, to go back to your safety question, not safe at all. They probably should have race radios, especially on a course where they might need to receive information about obstacles or wet corners and things like that.
Yeah.
But it just makes it so strange. It's a strange race. And it's all these riders you're seeing in jerseys you're not used to. I find it very disorienting, but it is quite fun to watch it unfold, especially when you look at like, why is so-and-so doing, like I saw today in the U23 race, maybe this was just people not thinking correctly, but it was like an American off the front in a two-man move and an American leading the peloton behind, where it's like, well, what's going on there? Like, I'd like to know the story behind that, because these aren't real teammates. They're just teammates for the day. So it's not, the teamwork is not seamless.
Okay. So I'm looking at the start list for gravel world championships. Very interesting. In the women's race, we have some very, very serious hitters. We've got Puck Peters, Lottie Kopecky, Lorna Wiebes, Femke Marcus, Tiffany Cromwell, Allison Jackson, Lucinda Brand, Fem Van Ippel. This is like a heavyweight roster of participants. In the men's race, we have Mohoric, we've got Jasper Stuyven, Toon Aerts, Peter Vakok. It's not really, there's a little bit of a delta here.
It's not. So last year, it was like a big start list, right? On the men's, you had like Van Aert and Valverde, who I think got.
We had Vermeersch,
Vanderpool. Maybe that was the year before. I'm just kind of like curious how long term do we see top riders at gravel worlds? I mean, as long as it's in Europe, you'll see some,
right?
But I mean, I guess it's a little funny. We don't know if Van Aert would have done it or not because he's hurt. He's not doing it.
Well, let's see what happens. Will Vanderpool go do it when he doesn't win Road Worlds? Will he just like pull up, which I think we've seen him do in the past?
I hate to even put this on record. I think this like Vanderpool winning Road Worlds, is this like a psyop from Russia? Like, what? This is not going to happen. Like, I'm actually shocked.
Right.
They've gotten so many people to believe this. It's like, oh, he's skinny. It's like, well, okay, you can lose weight. You're not going to be as strong though. And if you saw Tour of Luxembourg, he couldn't even get away from the group he was in to reel in the leaders to win the race overall. So yeah, okay, he's skinny. Doesn't mean he's going to win a climbing world championships. Yeah. Does he have a chance? Yeah, he's good enough. Like him and Van Aert always have a chance because they're just that talented. Is it going to happen? Probably not.
Right.
I don't know like how much these guys really care about Road Worlds. Like Connor Swift probably really cares. Could Connor Swift win? Probably, if he's doing it.
Yeah.
It isn't. I'm curious to see. It's in Flanders.
Why is it so hard to get information about this race?
They don't want you to know.
That's it. I've got a list of 10 top participants in each elite category. We don't have a full start list yet. We're a week out. It's because riders like Vanderpool are going to pull up. That's why. I'm no friend of. I'm a gravel enemy, but it's actually a race I would like to go to. It's in Leuven. Probably great riding. Like if you could go as a spectator, and you could probably do a lot of good riding, and then it would be a lot of good access to riders that you wouldn't get at a bigger race. As an event, it's probably cool. It's probably superior to the Road Worlds on the ground, like as far as viewer interaction. But right.
And I know Flanders Classics is trying to get into gravel. The whole thing, though, I'm not totally convinced that this is going to be like in 20 years, is there still a gravel world champienships? Or is it like, think of Marathon Mountain Bike Worlds. That was a big deal at one point, and now it's not even televised.
Yeah. We're not even talking about it. And it happened in the United States, and Christopher Blevins, who I just had on Choose the Hard Way, was second place finisher. But yeah, it didn't really get any coverage, did it?
Is it even here? Christopher Blevins, see if it's on his page. No, it got no coverage. I mean, it's hard when the races are not televised. It's very hard to get coverage. It's not even on his Pro Cycling Stats page. It's a world championship event. That's crazy. I guess because it's mountain bike. But yeah, when the races aren't televised, it's very hard to get coverage.
Yeah.
Who do you think? You mentioned Puck. I personally think she's going to win the Road Worlds.
Yeah.
Do you think Kristen Faulkner can double up?
Possibly. Yeah, I think it's similar to the chance that Remco has in the men's race, which is a significant one. I think it boils down to, as you mentioned, there's a lot of climbing on this course. The average gradient feels like something Kristen Faulkner can handle. Where she tends to excel is on courses where there's a short, punchy climb, but not a sustained climb. So I mean, that's where we've seen her win. And then I'm just thinking back to the classic season when climbs were slightly longer and steeper. It doesn't suit her. It's not her best terrain.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious about the wet, since it's 100% chance of rain, the wet descent. How does she do in that? I've not kept up. We need to have her back on the show. I've not kept up with her descending in the wet skills. I do think this is like my own personal crackpot theory. Like if Geraint Thomas and Bradley Wiggins can go from pursuiters to winning the Tour, I think Faulkner, like if she focused, and she did say this, that she was not great at climbing this year, like climbing on the road, because she was so focused on 4 or 5 minute power for the track, which is how she won the Olympic road race.
Right.
That you just like, you're not going to be able to toggle back and forth between long climbs and being, you got to be big on the track too. So you're not trying to be super skinny, but she really focused on it. It does stand to reason that her power, just her ability to put out sustained power for a long time, would make her a good climber, because that is what climbing is. People forget it. Just putting out power and then not being so heavy that you're being pushed down by gravity. So it's possible. I mean, that's how that's the blueprint for Thomas and Wiggins. In some ways, Lance Armstrong even, to win tours. So I don't know. I'd be curious if she really gave it a go. I think when she was on this show, she said that she had never trained at altitude. She was at altitude for a long time before this Worlds. So I'm curious to see like the effects of that. Like, do you have any thoughts about so the time trial happened? Chloe Dygert gets
I wanted to talk about Chloe Dygert. So Chloe Dygert,
defending time trial champion, we should say.
Yeah, defending time trial champion. I mean, kind of similar to Wout, has had now several very major wrecks that have resulted in a lot of time off the bike and have required substantial rehab. She's a generational talent. She's an incredible talent. And also, you have to have a hot hand. And once you get a hot hand, you keep winning. And sometimes once that hot hand goes away, boy, it can be hard to get it back. And the question, I think, is she's 27, right? Kristen Faulkner is 31. So going back to the point you just made, I completely think Faulkner could win the Tour. But it's going to have to happen fast, right? She's 31 years old. She's going to have to make a transformation, shift her focus. She's going to have to forgo some of the abilities she has now on shorter, punchier climbs or courses that feature climbs of that type if she actually wants to focus on climbing. Chloe, 27, can she get that hot hand back, Spencer?
Yeah, so she wins 15 races between 2018 and 2019 in a 2-season stretch. Since then, and that included like a stint off the front at the Road World Championships where it looked like she might win. Since 2020, so basically the last 5 seasons, she's won 5 races, with 3 of those being national titles. That's not fantastic. Like, it does just seem like it's the Wout problem. Anytime she gets momentum, she's then hurt and she's off the bike. She doesn't actually, being a pro for that long, she doesn't have a ton of experience racing in Europe. And it almost feels like her road racing is regressing. Like if you watch the classics, she'd be sitting at the back a lot. And then, so of course you get into a key point of Flanders, you can't do anything from the back, even if you're as strong as her. So it almost feels like we're watching her become a time trial specialist. It's the reverse, right? Usually you're a time trial specialist and then you Campenarts it out and you do other things. You wedge out into other disciplines. She's almost like the reverse of that, where she was a road race. I remember one year she showed up to the Tour Colorado and won every stage. I was like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But now she's like becoming a time trial specialist, can really only compete in those at the top level. And then is third behind Grace Brown. Kind of an odd story if we want to talk about that for a second. Grace Brown, Demi Vollering. Obviously, those are 2 very good riders. But it's just someone who won the 2019 World Championships, and she's just like fighting to get back to that level. Grace Brown, 32 years old, wins the Olympics, wins the World Championships time trial. First, by the way, her and Evenepoel, first people to ever do that. is retiring at the end of the year. Clearly, we have definitive proof. She is the world's best time trialist. She's also a very good stage racer, or very good road racer. That's crazy that she's retiring. I guess that shows you the lack of prospects for top women. The weird part about this, though, is like Demi Vollering in second, who's had it's like a sneaky, kind of disappointing season, as crazy as that is to say, since she's number 2 in the UCI World Rankings, but doesn't win a classic, doesn't win the Tour, partly because of a crash, but that's just kind of that's racing to an extent. Doesn't win Romandy, second at World Time Trial, and then I would say maybe the most disappointing one, just like not a factor in the Olympic Games road race for a female professional cyclist. Olympics is a huge deal, as we've seen with Kristen Faulkner.
Yeah,
but she's getting paid, I believe, $1 million. She's like signed $1 million a year contract. Like, how is Grace Brown? I guess the prospects are so bad for her that she's just retiring. Maybe Grace Brown is in a position to say 500,000 euros a year. That's not interesting to me. I'm going to go do other things. But it is just shocking that you could have someone who's demonstrably better at this discipline and is a very good road racer, just not even have the same sponsor interest as someone that she's beating, who is like emerging into a world superstar almost.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, I don't know enough about Grace Brown's background. I don't believe she came from private equity or venture capital, though. So I don't think she's choosing to forego her World Tour contract to go back into finance.
The weirdest part about it is she's on FDJ Suez. Is that the team is that where Vollering is going next year?
Wow.
Hold on a second.
Well, and while we're on the topic of contracts, Chloe Dygert just did a 2-year extension with Canyon and SRAM as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we should talk about this. Sorry to jump around so much, but while we're talking contracts, I don't think we've talked about this Wout lifetime contract with Wiesma, right? So what thoughts do you have about this, and what does this potentially mean for Wout?
So this has got to be our last topic because I got to run. But I've seen a lot of ink. What are they like? Ink spilled over this. Europeans especially tend to be like very befuddled by this. Clearly, these people are not fans of college sports, because this is like a very common contract you see with college coaches. Like John Calipari signed a lifetime contract with Kentucky basketball. Do you want to guess where John Calipari coaches right now, Andrew? It's not with Kentucky. They basically just fired him. Like, This is all just marketing fluff. Like, it's probably some sort of running writer option, where like he probably essentially has some more. I would love to look at the specifics, but I would guess it's like, let's just say it's a 1-year deal with where Wout has the option to extend it every year, and maybe even like some sort of slight price negotiation there. So he's not locked into like the same pay, because that you think, well, structurally, how would this work? Like, what if he signed for €1 million a year, and then in 10 years he's racing, but inflation's been 150% every year, like Argentina, and he's making peanuts? Like, wouldn't he want to renegotiate that? I would guess it's just some sort of like running extension that he can either decline or accept. So in some ways it functions as a lifetime deal, because like, what if the team goes under? Like, any number of things could happen. These are not stable organizations. These lifetime deals are like never quite what they seem.
Yeah, and we saw Matthew Van Der Poel has a lifetime contract with...
It's 10-year, right?
10 year.
With Canyon.
Until he's...
which is weird, because he only has a 5-year contract with the team.
Yeah. That clearly there's an alignment of incentives there. We've talked about it in the past. He likely, I'm guessing, has an equity stake in Canyon, is a part of that relationship. With this Wout Wiesma relationship, again, Geraint Thomas and Luke Rowe were talking about this on their podcast. I guess rumor among pro cyclists is that Wout was given some supermarkets. I'm guessing perhaps Wout was given some equity in a supermarket chain. Perhaps that's part of the deal.
Wait, hold on a second. So flesh this out for me. Which supermarket?
That is what Geraint Thomas said. He said the rumor is that Wout has been given some supermarkets as part of the deal. I'm guessing he probably has received some equity in a supermarket chain.
Do they have a supermarket chain as a sponsor, though?
Maybe they used to, right? Wasn't Jumbo a supermarket chain? But they're no longer
sponsoring the team.
Yeah. I don't know. It's very
peculiar. If I was Wout, I'd want equity in Visma. It's like Europe's biggest private tech company right there.
Right.
It's some pre-IPO equity.
They're champions of cloud software. They've got cloud ERP. They've got it all. If you want to get in the cloud, they're the place to go. Maybe that's the deal that he worked out for himself. The thing that I was, and I'm sure many other pro cycling fans are thinking about when they see lifetime contract, they just think of the Chris Froome deal with Israel Premier Tech, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, he appears to have some ironclad deal where he's making millions of euros to live in this man in the high castle scenario where he thinks he can win the Tour. And I don't think he's going to do that. I also personally, like, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Chris Froome, and I admire his level of self-belief in the face of daunting odds that he could ever do it.
You're like, oh, the spin man for Chris Froome.
But I mean, I gotta say that is the level of conviction that it takes if you want to be able to go do stuff like win the Tour. It's just once you tilt to the other side of the fulcrum, it starts to be a strange look. But if you didn't actually think that, you would never do something like win the Tour. That's what people don't get. They're like, oh, this guy's off his rocker. It's like, no, you actually just probably don't know people who have achieved at the level Chris Froome has, because that's how they think, actually.
I would actually invert that and say he was always off his rocker. It's just when they're performing well, it seems like a lesson you could learn from or charming. And they're like, no, these people are all nuts, man. Like to win the Tour, you have to be crazy.
Yes,
like crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, he's from Kenya, like no road cycling pedigree from the country he's from.
Right.
And he's like going to world championships. Do you remember when he was like, he would like ride off the time trial pedestal that they start on because he was so bad. Like I think one time he ran into a UCI official, like at the start of a time trial.
He was a beefy boy too when he was back on Barlow World. Go check the tape. He's a big boy. Yeah.
And just probably then he thought like I can win the Tour, just like insane self-belief. So yeah, you are right to some extent. There's like, he's doing the same thing now that made him successful. He's just not fast enough.
Yeah. What we don't know about Wout is how is he going to handle the trauma from this series of horrific wrecks? Because he's had some, not just bad luck, he's had horrible luck. And does he come back from it? Does he come back?
Banged his knee up a little bit. Just scraped his knee. Yeah, his knee was sliced open, but I think he comes back. I mean, think how bad that crash was at Dwarves. So bad. And then
bad.
He looked like almost, I would say, as good as he's ever looked right when he crashed out of the Vuelta. So if he can come back from the spring, I tend to think he's going to be pretty good. I mean, I guess I brought this up before. Someone messaged me on Instagram, which I will read. Is Wout a bad bike handler? Or is it time that you guys acknowledge it?
Are you kidding me?
He's not a bad bike handler. Clearly, that's insane. But you can't be like 3-time cyclocross world champion to be a bad bike handler. Does he position himself in a way in the peloton that increases his chance of crashing? This is something it's been a brain worm. It's been a worm in my mind. I'm thinking maybe he is positioning himself poorly, like relative to Van der Poel or Pogačar, who never seemed to crash.
I think it's a roll of the dice.
I mean, you look at that Vuelta crash, he's following someone else down a climb, down a descent. Like if he's in front, he's controlling the pace there. Maybe he's not following some clueless dude off the side of the road. Like,
I don't know. Think of that time. I'm going to throw out a Jens Voigt example for all the Jens fans out there. Maybe they're doing the Jensi Fondo in Marin. But remember that when Jens was descending in the Tour and he rolled a tubular while he was on the front.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff just happens sometimes. I mean, we saw it this year with the mega wreck with Jonas, Remco, the whole funky bunch. Like they were in the front.
Funky bunch. Yeah, that was truly as stuff happens. I guess you even think about Pogačar at the end of the Giro, where he's like RG barging on stage 21. No reason to do that. He could be a minute off the back. Like, what if he crashes there? We're saying, like, what's he doing? Why is he positioning himself like that? He just doesn't happen to crash, I guess.
Yeah.
In those moments. So the spotlight isn't on him.
All right. I know you've got to go, and I need to go as well. And Juan Ayuso, what's going on? What happens in 2025 with this guy?
It's funny. Someone was just asking me about this. So he's not racing Worlds, right? I don't see him on the start list.
I think I saw him on the start list. Kind of weird.
So this is a big same thing with Udo.
Oh no, he is on the start list. Yeah, he's on the start list. He's on there.
Hold on a second. What start list am I looking at? Are you looking at gravel or there's no way he's on the gravel start list?
That'd be great if he was. No, he's on the Road Worlds. Spain. Wow, Spain has such a stacked team, none of whom will win.
So
Bilbao, Rodriguez, Ayuso, Mas. It's true. I mean, they're all incredible talents. They're not going to win this race, though.
Yeah. Spain has a unique ability to have. You look at their start list. It's like the airport test in basketball or football. You see that team at the airport, and you think they're going to win. It's like that's Spain for cycling. They're never going to win. But Ayuso and Udo Brooks actually both. I'm quite curious about this because on one hand, you'd say any criticism is absurd. Like Ayuso's 21, 22, Udo Brooks is 21.
Wow.
Plenty of time, no rush. Here's the thing that concerns me. So Ayuso finishes his best career result. I guess you could say his best career result is winning Basque Country this year, but you'd put at least a minor asterisk on there since everyone good crashed out in that crash we just referenced. But let's just say third at the 2022 Vuelta was his best GC result in a Grand Tour at least. That was 2 years ago. And he hasn't done better. That actually starts, even if someone is really young and you think it shouldn't affect them, it does start to affect them. And it's a dangerous place to be someone that's finished on a Grand Tour podium at 1920. You remember Pogačar finishes third at the Vuelta in 2019 and then immediately is exceeding that. So any pressure is gone. Also, something that concerns me about both those guys, I was doing the dishes the other night. This is the type of thing that I think about. I'm like, how many inconsistent Grand Tour riders have you ever seen become consistent Grand Tour riders?
Right.
It's actually a very small, if not zero number of them. It's one of those things. Strugglish. Was he inconsistent though?
Well, I mean, if you take into account crashing all the time.
Oh, okay.
He's a bit inconsistent.
Well, let's set crashing aside.
Yeah.
He's going fast. He's just not going fast in the right direction.
Fast. He's hitting the ground pretty fast a lot of the time. That's his inconsistency. But this I would agree with you. He just seems to lack focus. He seems immature. I mean, I don't know the guy, but that's my read from afar.
Juan Ayuso.
Yeah,
he's a perfect English speaker, so I'm a little gun shy here.
All
but
right, let's get him on. Let's find out.
Yeah, I mean the tour stuff was weird. I feel like weirder. Everyone's forgot it because he got COVID and dropped out. That was super bizarre on stage 4 when he's hiding at the back of the bunch, and Pogačar's having to yell, "Get your fat ass to the front." Race radio.
That's what I'm saying. Should your team leader have to yell that at you?
And as Probably I say, with the inconsistency, is that something that ever gets better? Yeah, that's my concern. And then Udo Brooks seems like a really nice guy. I actually feel bad about every time I hear him talk, I feel bad about saying anything bad about him. But just, maybe some immaturity there in the way that at least he left his old team, and you worry, you just kind of get in this pattern and you're like, are these guys hurtling towards think of people forget Mikel Landa was Juan Ayuso before there was Juan Ayuso. We thought he was the next big thing, and he's had a really good career, and it's not enough. That's what I worry about these guys, where Juan Ayuso could have he could have Enric Mas's career, which almost nobody has. It's incredible. And think of the disappointment. That's when you see a young rider like that, everyone assumes they're going to be the next Pogačar. They won't. I guarantee it, because Pogačar is one of one. He's potentially the best of all time. And you can't look at young riders. You can't look at Isaac Del Toro and say, that's the next Tadej Pogačar. No, he's going to be good. And then look at a rider like Mark Hirschi and say, if he has Mark Hirschi's career, is that a disappointment? And almost everyone would say yes. But then think how few people have a better career than Mark Hirschi. Almost none. You're talking in the single digits, perhaps, at least currently. So I worry about unrealistic expectations kind of caving on an already immature psyche.
Yeah, just going back to people who are inconsistent but have moments of brilliance as Grand Tour riders. Do they pan out over time? let's set aside that Miguel Angel Lopez got into the hot sauce, right? Like this guy had nuclear piss. We don't know for how long, right? But
allegedly, I think we're supposed to say allegedly.
No. I mean, I've got his stats open. He's been banned for 4 years.
Maybe just for trafficking the drugs, though. We don't know if
they just got him for a RICO Act. It was use and possession of minotropin, a hormonally active medication for the treatment of fertility disturbances. I think,
I would guess it increases your hematocrit.
Hold on. Extracted from the urine of postmenopausal women. Not something that a healthy young male rider typically has in their bloodstream. Anyway, but earlier in his career, he was this kind of rider. He was occasionally brilliant, uneven, and he just never matured. I mean, he like threw massive tantrums, dropped out of the Vuelta that year. I mean, it was so strange, right?
Apparently he had a quote. I couldn't tell if this was true or not, if this was a joke, but someone that was there said he like got off the bike and was like, "It's been nice surfing with all of you. I'll see you later." Like, it wasn't like he was not losing his shit. He was just like, "I'm going home." It's like, it's stage 20 and you're in fourth row. What are you doing?
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not in any way saying that Juan Ayuso is analogous to Miguel Angel Lopez. I'm just saying he had an uneven and sometimes brilliant early career, and then over time it just got stranger. He never really came into focus.
Yeah. So to your point, third at the 2018 Giro, third at the 2018 Vuelta. So
right.
Those are some of the two earliest Grand Tours he does. Obviously, you look at that and say, wow, what potential. Spoiler alert, he never did better than that. I think that's what people don't take into account. It's not about being good at a young age. All that matters is your rate of improvement. It's like Einstein's theory of relativity. It's like, okay, you're third at the Giro at 19, or I guess in Ayuso's case, third at the Vuelta at 19. That looks great now relative to everything about you, including your age. If you're third at the Vuelta at 29, that's not so awesome. And if you don't get better, you're going to be like 10th, because it's like the Quintana effect where everyone gets faster. You get no faster. You start to look worse, even though you're staying in the same place. So you have to be constantly improving. I think improvement, just one of my big things in life and sport, like improvement is underrated, and the ability to improve and to recognize things that aren't perfect about yourself and to work on making them better is the ultimate underrated trait. And it's the same with young cyclists.
It's compound interest, Spencer. You start with 2 rental properties, then you turn it into 4.
And then you got people working underneath you.
Cut out the middleman, and all that cash flow is just going right into your pocket.
It's like, where are these properties? Oh, the swamp in Florida. Like, how could that ever go wrong? Before I go, Remco Evenepoel. So here, let's think of the 3 big stories we've talked about in the last, let's say, year. The Visma Quickstep merger. One Pro Cycling. Who remembers that? You get a cookie if you remember that. And Remco Evenepoel going to Red Bull Bora. I did hear he was inside the Red Bull facility, so I'm curious to see how this plays out.
I agree. I don't think that we're done with this story yet.
It now appears that the same newsbreakers that were telling us that it's a done deal are saying it's not a done deal and he's staying at Quickstep. I think the theme of this is you can just ignore any news you hear in cycling.
I agree.
It's like, wait till Jan 1, see what's going on at the Tour Down Under. Don't pay attention to any story.
Yeah, I don't think this Remco thing is settled yet.
This seems weird to me. I think there's a little bit of a strategic leakage, as I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah. Remco also, I don't know if you've noticed this, he tends to put out a vlog right around the time some major news is about to break about himself, and he just put out a vlog about, it was, day in the life, training and eating of Remco Evenepoel. And man, I wanted his breakfast to be a little bit sexier. It was, he had, I think, like 4 dry bagel halves, some cream cheese, an omelet, a bowl of porridge. He was it looked bleak.
And come on,
it wasn't as cool as when you see the buffet the riders have, and it's that EF chef. They got the Oatly,
Yeah, Oatly. They do have a good brand. That team is a great brand. You could quibble about their ability to produce on the road and the seemingly endless doping positives they have that trickle out and seem to get never picked up by the press. But yeah, I do think I'd be curious to see what happens after Worlds. Because I said last week, it's funny because Quickstep's not last week, the week before. Quickstep is good. It's a good team. Like they support him fairly well in these Grand Tours.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced they're going to make it past 2026. So he's got to go somewhere eventually. And him, can you imagine though, him and Roglic on the same team? That doesn't.
No. And also is Roglic going to hang around,
He's definitely hanging around. Where's he going to go?
Does he pop over to Tudor with Alaphilippe? Two of the finest goatees in the World Tour peloton together.
It's kind of an interesting option for Tudor. It's not going to happen, but
you heard it here first.
It's kind of interesting. He's got a deal for next year.
Everybody's got a deal until they've got another deal.
Well, and this is what these guys don't want to hear. Primoz doesn't want to hear this. Remco doesn't want to hear this. It's like we all saw the Tour with our eyes. How are they going to beat? There's two guys that are just better than everybody else.
Yeah.
It's probably you have to do it with some sort of platoon. Like Remco goes to the Tour with Primoz as a teammate, and Remco's attacking like in Lille on stage 1, and just like pure chaos. But those guys don't want to play second fiddle. And like Primoz is probably done with that. He's like, I already did that on Visma. I won Jonas a few tours. I don't want to do that again. Kind of interesting. It's interesting to think about. And I did hear he's drinking Monster Energy inside the Red Bull facility because he's so mad about the Remco rumors.
I'm going to throw out one more wild one. This is a scenario I want people to think about as we're considering 2025. Pog wins Worlds. Okay. So Pog has his Worlds title. What's left? I think he wants Paris-Roubaix. And what happens to Wout? I'm just thinking about like, how does Wout get blocked out of some of the titles? I think
you're right.
Should have him as Palmares, right?
Yeah. So he wins Worlds, which you could tell he really wanted on the Attia podcast. He wins that. Yeah. And then he goes, he clearly wants San Remo, but San Remo is that's like a weekend bartending gig. Like he can fit that in, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I do think like, what's he going after next? Like he's got to stay interested. Roubaix, people might laugh at it or like shrug it off. Like he could win Roubaix. He's that good. He could do it. Yeah. It would be hilarious. I mean, I would be so sad, but yeah, I could actually see that happening. It's like he's actually a Flanders Roubaix specialist this year. Sorry, Wout gets second at San Remo, second at Roubaix.
Brutal.
And does today know that the Vuelta exists? Potentially no. Wait till he hears about this third Grand Tour he could go win.
Yeah, wait till he hears about those discos.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, you're on the seaside. You're going out every night, you get home at 4 a.m, but then you said, you could tell like he had some terrible HRV score, and Attia was like, is that just because you're drinking so much the night before? And he's like, oh yeah. I could tell he's not abstaining from the good stuff. But well, this is maybe the longest show we've ever done. I'm not even quite sure what we talked about, but we'll let you go, Andrew, get back to your day, disrupting industries. And I can't remember the rest. Meeting people, talking to people, something like that.
Yeah, doing it all. I look forward to bringing you all another year of excellence in content and great sleep. That's what I commit and pledge to you.
Thank you so much. And I feel like my sleep's getting a little bit better because of the Better Lab. But Flow bikes, think Flow. That's where the race is. Sorry if you live in the US, the workarounds are getting harder and harder. This is this dystopia that you outlined with your father visiting, trying to watch the Chiefs game. I believe that was like a year and a half ago. Yeah. But it's going to get harder, if not impossible, to do workarounds. You're just going to have to pay the man to watch the races. So I used to hate Flow. And I want to ask you this before we go, where this podcast is never going to end. How did you watch the Vuelta?
VPN Flow.
Yeah, same with me.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty good. Like no commercial. There's a pre-roll. That's it.
Well, yeah, you get that. And sometimes you can just hit the tile that's below the main tile and it'll skip the commercial.
Yeah.
I don't know. The ad targeting is poor at best. Part of me hopes that Flow stays a bit unsophisticated because it does enable us to do things like just use a VPN and watch the races we want to watch. Whereas with, big streaming, it's kind of impossible now.
Yes. We need, right? It was like Max. They used to have Eurosport streaming in Europe. They popped over to Max, much more sophisticated. Like I can have Max in the US, doesn't mean I get the French Max. I have to sign up for a French account. I've got to pay Max twice, you know, and I've got to be in France. Like, it's actually getting harder. I watched the Tour in France on Flow because I thought it was like the most consistent, at least US language coverage. So yeah, I've been coming to Flow. I used to really dislike them. And I think Jonathan Kaplan, our friend, has pointed out it is impossible to cancel. But, you know, if you just embrace it, embrace the madness of Flow, it's not a terrible service. And with a VPN, you can watch almost the whole calendar.
Yeah, I feel like, at least for the Vuelta, they had the commentary, the Eurosport commentary, whatever feed they had was fantastic.
Yeah, it's good.
Right?
Good comment. It's usually the people who aren't being contracted by Eurosport for that specific race. Yeah. And moonlight on Flow. It's not, I think they just do like an international feed and Flow picks it up and they pay some small amount for it.
Was it Hannah Walker? Is that who the commentator was?
Yeah, it was Hannah Walker for a bit. It was Koen Accord, and then maybe Nico Roche was back on.
Did they have Nathan Van Hooydonk on there for some of it? Or am I imagining that? He's whatever. He was on GCN. He's fantastic. Hannah Walker is one of my personal favorites. I love her commentary. She's excellent.
She's really good. She's gotten a lot better too. I mean, speaking of like clearly just like did her first year and then was like listened to it and then just made improvements and got better. I saw her at the Tour and I was like legitimately starstruck. I was like, oh my God, it's Hannah Walker right next to me. What's going on?
She's great at her job. Good job, Hannah. You're the best.
All right. Well, thanks, Andrew. Right. And we will talk after Sunday's World Championship Women's on Saturday, I believe. So got a double.